In this video, I'm going to be explaining the basics of AI and natural language processing. To put it simply, AI is a type of machine learning that focuses on doing tasks which would normally require a human. Things like speech, object identification, and image creation. Things that were previously only able to be done by humans can now be done by computers. Before we step into AI, let's talk a bit about what machine learning is. To put it simply, machine learning, including AI, is just a series of complex formulas. To be more specific, it's just probability. For example, let's say you're taking care of a herd of cattle. In your farm, you had two areas which dispensed food. The cows could choose between going to area A or going to area B. Now, let's say you have an automatic feeder that dispenses food once a day. You want to know how much food you should provide to each feeder. To learn that, you want to know the chances of a cow choosing to come to feeder A or to feeder B. Finding this out is fairly simple. Over time, record how many cows use each feeder, then take the average. After that, you can use those numbers to calculate the chances of each feeder being used. Finally, you can use that information to determine which feeder should get what amount of food. Does that make sense? If it does, then you understand the basics of machine learning. If a computer was to do this, it would be considered machine learning. More specifically, the process described would be called training. When working with machine learning, it's generally done in two stages: training and testing, or production. As we just described in our animal example, the training stage would occur when we observed how the cows behave, observed what feeder they are most likely to go to, and then we use that information to get our probability. The production stage of our example would be using this knowledge to determine how much food to give the cows. A useful feature of this process is that the AI is only ever required to train a single time, assuming that nothing with the cows changes. We assume that the cows in our example won't suddenly start behaving differently, so the probability used by the AI can remain the same. Now that we know the basics, let's talk about natural language processing. Natural language processing, or NLP for short, is AI which is made to simulate or process human speech. Things like ChatGPT, text summarization, or even Google Translate are all good examples of NLP. The same basic concept we discussed earlier in the video also applies to NLP. It's simply a series of probabilistic equations. However, the equations used in the NLP models are usually a lot more complex and intricate. Knowing this, we can determine that when we talk to ChatGPT, it's not actually speaking to us. It's simply using probability to determine the words that are most likely to be used when responding to what the user entered. For example, if you ask it, what color are apples? It doesn't think, what color are apples? Ah, they're red. Instead, it determines that in its knowledge base, when someone would use those specific words in that specific order, the most common response to those words would be, apples are red. This is where we find our first limitation to standard chatbots. They have a very hard time answering questions that have never been asked before. Let's take a moment to cover some misconceptions about AI, specifically about chatbots and natural language processing. The first misconception being that natural language processing is just copying responses that other people have given. If constructed and trained properly, a chatbot should never plagiarize material it was trained on. If trained correctly, it should only use that material to learn sentence structure and information. The next big misconception is that chatbots, which use NLP, don't make spelling or grammar mistakes. This isn't true. Specifically, if the text it's responding to is filled with grammar and spelling mistakes, it will predict that the text which it should output should be filled with spelling and grammar mistakes, and vice versa. If the text is properly formatted and everything is spelled correctly, it will predict that everything in its response should be spelled correctly. This is only a basic overview of the inner workings of AI, but it should give you enough knowledge to understand what's going on behind the scenes so that you or your company can make better use of AI tools.